Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. It's a webinar where we talk about Lyme disease. I look forward to hearing your questions tonight. As you all know, every time that we do these webinars, they're different because the questions are always different, which means you create these webinars. I'm looking forward to see what you have in store for me. I am creating a recording of tonight's webinar. And tomorrow morning, somewhere probably around 9:30 in the morning, you should get an email notification from me saying that the recording is ready to be viewed. Okay, so if you happen to miss something tonight as we're discussing things here, feel free to watch that recording tomorrow. The other thing I'll ask you to do is if you are getting good, useful information out of these webinars, please share the webinars, the recording, or even the announcements I have announcing that you can sign up for the next webinar. Share those with people you know that might get some benefit. Okay, feel free to do that. Let's see. Oh, I forgot to do my normal introduction, which is for those that are new here. I'm glad we got new people. We also have a lot of familiar names that I'm seeing on my message board as well too. The way you participate is either to listen to the responses I give to some of the questions, or feel free to try to write a question yourself. Now, keep in mind, I cannot get to everybody's questions. I got a very upset email from somebody last week saying that I never got to their question. Well, the truth is I can't get to everybody's questions. There's just too many of them to do. But if you do write them and I happen to be able to get to them, I will answer it. Okay. So the way you write those questions is down at the bottom of your screen, on the right-hand side of the screen, is a chat box, and you can go ahead and write your question to me through there. The only thing I ask is do not hit the enter key until that question is complete. If you happen to try to create multiple paragraphs by hitting your enter key, what happens on my side is it arrives as multiple questions, which gets to be very difficult for me to follow. During the webinar tonight, I will read your questions out loud as I get to them. I will also have them visible on the screen for those of you that are participating in the live version. However, in the recorded version, even though these show up in the live version on your screen, they don't show up in the recorded version. Okay, all right. And so I think that's it. One more thing, and the email tomorrow morning, there will be a sign up that you can click to sign up for next week's webinar. Next week will be the last webinar that we have in the month of May. Okay. All right, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. Hello, Sarah. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I was diagnosed with Lyme and Bartonella. Let's see. I don't have pain in my body, only neurologic symptoms, especially brain fog and dizziness. I always feel like I'm off balance. What causes these symptoms? Is it cytokines or the bacteria itself? Also, why does Lyme affect people differently, some neuro and some all pain? So that's the last question is the $1 million question, and everyone is affected differently with Lyme. Although there are many common themes we will see with people with Lyme. So the majority of people will have some degree of fatigue, some degree of cognitive or thinking problems, also known as brain fog. People will often have body pains, and people will have some degree of neurologic dysfunction. Okay, those are the 4 common areas, but not everyone does. And that's what makes it very confusing to manage this illness. I don't have a good explanation for why it manifests so much differently in each person. What I will tell you is every one of us has slightly different functioning immune systems. We have different genetic makeups that predispose us to different illnesses and to different conditions developing in us as well too, okay? In terms of what is the cause, so the majority of Lyme symptoms, as many of you know, I talk about this in the webinars, that one of the things that Lyme does is it triggers your white blood cells to manufacture a group of chemicals that are called cytokines. And cytokines are good and bad. On the good side, they turn the immune system on to try to fight the infection. But if the immune system is having a hard time and it's not getting rid of the infection, it's going to keep trying. And eventually it overproduces cytokines, okay? So too many cytokines give you brain fog, fatigue, make you hurt all over. The majority of Lyme symptoms are directly due to those cytokines, okay? In addition, wherever the germ lives, it can actually set up inflammatory reactions right in that place where it lives. So sometimes you'll have a person that has a perpetually sore knee, for instance, and perhaps they have a bigger germ load sitting in that knee, okay? So it can be both direct effect of the germ causing inflammation where the germ lives, but also the white blood cells will produce these cytokines that can go throughout the whole body. And so that's why you get these system-wide symptoms as well, too, all right? Let's see. And yeah, I think I answered your question there. Good luck to you, Sarah. Hello, Kay. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you for answering my question. You're welcome. Let's see. I was tested for mold by Great Plains Lab. It was positive for zearalenone with a level of 20.7, cutoff is 3.2. And citrinin with a level of 65.74. I was also positive for ochratoxin A, but the level was below the cutoff of 7.5. Are these levels exceptionally high? Are there specific treatment supplements that better targeted for those specific types of mold over other mold types? Currently, my doctor has me taking GI detox as my only treatment for mold. I'm also taking MC bar 1 for Bartonella and 500 milligrams daily azithromycin. Would you recommend anything additional for the mold? So some molds have a specific binder that's going to work, or mold toxins have specific binders that are work better for them. Okay, so for instance, a glutathione, which is a toxin that comes from mold, but also can come from yeast in your intestines. Actually, yeast can produce glutathione too, is bound best by bentonite clay. Ochratoxins tend to be bound very well by activated charcoal. And then citrinin and zearalenone, in my experience, tend to do better with a broad mixture of binders. All right. So that GI Detox is a product that is made by a company called Biobotanical Research. And it's what I call a broad spectrum detox agent. It has a variety of things in it. So it's got charcoal, it's got clay, it has fulvic acid, humic acid, and it's got some silica in it as well too. So it's good at picking up just about any kind of toxin because it's got something in it for about any kind of toxin, all right? With this kind of picture you have, I would use a broad spectrum product like this GI Detox. There's another one that recently got released out there by Research Nutritionals, which is called Mycopul, MYCOPUL. It's got similar ingredients in it and is broad spectrum, also like the GI Detox. So those tend to be the two that I'm using in my practice now, okay? The GI Detox, the way I like using it is I like to eventually work people up to taking a couple pills twice a day. And keep in mind when you use it, it's a binder. It's actually binding up those toxins in your intestinal tract so that they can't be reabsorbed back into your bloodstream, all right? But that means it's combined other things too, like your medicines and supplements. So my advice to people is when you're using binders like charcoal or clay or a GI Detox or a Mycopul by Research Nutritional, any of those, what you want to do is you want to stop your medicines and supplements about 30 minutes before you take the binder. And then you can resume taking your other medicines and supplements 2 hours after you take the binder. Food, you can actually have any time, but there is more of an ideal time to have food. And that is whenever you eat, it causes your gallbladder to contract, okay? And the gallbladder holds toxins that have been processed by the liver. So these mold toxins do get processed by the liver, but the liver doesn't change them into any kind of anything decent, okay? So they go to the liver as a fat-based mold toxin, they come out as a fat-based mold toxin. Some of them, not all of them, some of them get stored into the gallbladder. The others go into your bile duct and just leak out into the intestines, all right? But what happens when you have GI Detox or any of these binders, about 30 minutes after you have them, they will have worked through the stomach down into the part of the small intestines where the gallbladder releases its stuff, okay? So if you eat 30 minutes after you take the GI Detox, that causes the gallbladder to contract. at the time when the binder is sitting, right where the gallbladder unleashes its stuff, basically, all right? But in reality, you could eat anytime, but that's a better time to eat, would be 30 minutes after you take the GI detox. I don't think you need to take anything in addition to this. So let's talk just briefly, so those of you that aren't familiar with mold toxin issues, what we know is there's about 25% of us that have a genetic predisposition where we can't handle mold toxins when we breathe them in. So me, on the other hand, I could walk into a building that has mold toxin fog and I could breathe all those mold toxins in. They would get absorbed into my bloodstream and I might not even be bothered by it because I'm set up to deal with it. And what my system is set up to do, and 75% of people are set up to do, is certain kinds of our white blood cells will see those mold toxins and tag them. Other types of white blood cells will come in and then break down these tag toxins. That's what's supposed to happen, okay? But if that doesn't happen, what happens next is these mold toxins, the liver will try to clean them. And the liver, and how it cleans a fat-based toxin is it takes and tries to make it a water-soluble toxin by, through a bunch of chemical reactions, adding some water-soluble chemical groups to the toxin, okay? And then if it were able to do that as a water-soluble toxin, it would mix in our poop and we would poop them out. They would never bother us. But what winds up happening here is the liver doesn't transform them into a water-soluble toxin. They get moved by the liver into the bile system, some of it into the gallbladder, the rest of it just leaks right out through the bile duct into the intestines. And eventually, as a fat-soluble toxin, they literally get reabsorbed right back into your bloodstream. So you just get this endless loop, okay? So what you want to do is you want to grab hold of those toxins out in the intestines, all right? And that's what the binders do. Again, GI detox, 2 pills twice a day in this kind of a situation, all right? But the other things that you could consider doing that might make the detox easier on you is when you start moving toxins, they are going to trigger a flare in those cytokines I talked about earlier, okay? So I often will have people on things to lower cytokines at the same time I'm pulling the toxins out. My favorite anti-cytokine agent is a product made by Thorne called Mariva 500. It's curcumin. Curcumin is a component of turmeric, and it gets inside of white blood cells and blocks cytokine production, all right? The other thing that can be helpful in this kind of situation too is to work with glutathione. I like working with liposomal glutathione because liposomal varieties are better absorbed than non-liposomal varieties. And the product I like to use for that is a product made by Research Nutritionals called Tri-Fortify. They've got good data showing that it has good absorption into your red blood cells and other cells therefore as well, okay? And that's 5 milliliters, which is 1 teaspoonful 1 time a day. What that does in terms of cytokines is it is a very strong antioxidant that lowers oxidizing agents that trigger the white blood cells to make cytokines, okay? So think of your curcumin as blocking the factory production line of cytokines, and think of the glutathione as intercepting and blocking the order or the information that goes to the white blood cells to tell them to make cytokines, okay? You can kind of think of it that way, all right? So a basic detox protocol I like using is the GI detox, like we just talked about, curcumin, which is the Mariva 500, and the glutathione, okay? All right, those are the thoughts that I have for you there, all right? Good luck to you. For those of you that need more information about mold toxicity, let me just do a quick screen share here. All right, so let's see here. So this is, excuse me, it's allergy season here in Seattle. Apologize for that. Anyhow, this is my Lyme disease information site. I know you're aware of this. It's Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. This tab right here is my online Lyme guide. So this has all kinds of information about how to deal with issues that occur in Lyme disease, all right? So in my detoxification section, click on it there. Take a look at this article called Mold toxin illness, or mold and Lyme toxin illness, that is. And it provides information about how do you test for mold toxicity, but also then provides information about what kind of binders you can use and how you use them. Okay. All right. All right. Let's see here. Hello, Nina. Let's see. Hey, Marty. Greetings from Niagara on the Lake. Oh, that Nina. Hi, Nina. I know Nina, by the way, everyone. Let's see. Had Pfizer vax 3 weeks ago. Within 10 minutes, the blood pressure went very high, but now at 157 over 106. 4 months ago was 115 over 78. Stopped anti-cytokine supplements 1 week before the vax. Last week, back on Mariva. Is this a vax allergy or is Lyme back? Severe fatigue and brain fog, how to treat. Okay. So I have not heard of the COVID vaccines leading to high blood pressure. I haven't seen that happen. That doesn't mean it can't happen. I would not call that a regular side effect that we see. Most of the side effects that we see with the COVID vaccine are going to be related to the vaccine causing cytokines to become elevated. And as many of you know, I already said your Lyme symptoms are due to excess cytokines. And therefore, as the COVID vaccine triggers cytokine elevations, it may look like your Lyme got active. Okay. Now, what happens is when you get the vaccine, it causes your cells to start manufacturing this protein that's found on the covering of the COVID virus called the spike protein. The immune system is going to see that, and some of the white blood cells will sound the alarm by making cytokines. Okay, we want them to do that. We want your white blood cells to make cytokines to tell the rest of the immune system to come in and learn to be immune, to develop immunity to the COVID virus. All right, that's a good thing. Some people, for some reason, get a bit of a larger cytokine turn on than other people. So for most people with that first vaccine, usually within days, the people are going to start getting better from their cytokine spike, okay? After the second vaccine, sometimes it can take about a week, all right? Now that's in an average person. There are some people that it can take weeks for this cytokine increase to go down and to start feeling normal again. At this point, what I would probably do, even though I know I am recommending to everyone to not do your anti-cytokine herbs beginning about a week before the vaccine and try not to resume them for at least 2 weeks after the vaccine, and because we want that cytokine surge to happen to train your immune system, okay? But when I see people that have more extreme cytokine surges on the first one, I will have them, I am recommending they actually keep their anti-cytokine agents going when they get their second one. We know you're going to have a robust cytokine surge. We don't necessarily need to limit, or we don't necessarily need not to block it. You're evidently going to get a strong enough one here, okay? At this point, what I would urge you to do probably is partly what you're doing, which is be back on your Mariva. Given the degree to which you're knocked down, you might want to go to 2 pills 3 times a day of that, okay? I would also consider getting back on the glutathione, liposomal glutathione, to help start lowering some of the cytokines down as well, too, okay? Now, I will tell you that LymeDisease.org, many of you are probably familiar with that organization. They're based out of California. They've got a project called My Lyme Data, where they periodically will collect information from people that are in their database. They'll ask them questions and try to get answered. Okay, so they have recently studied based on responses from people with Lyme. Do people with Lyme tend to get any worse problems with the COVID vaccine than people that don't have Lyme? And what their data is suggesting is that people with Lyme have the same type of outcomes in terms of side effect problems that people without Lyme have. So having Lyme did not necessarily make this happen to you. It's just that you happen to be in a group that's having a stronger surge in cytokines than some might, okay? So I would focus on trying to get cytokines knocked down. Again, I would do the Mariva 500 as 2 pills 3 times a day, and I would do the Trifortified glutathione 1 teaspoon 2 times a day, probably until you start to turn the corner. And then you could drop that down to 1 teaspoon 1 time a day. And in your situation, as you go for a second vaccine, I would keep these going. Okay. Now, my understanding is in Canada right now, which is where Niagara-on-the-Lake is, everyone. My understanding is that in Canada, the authorities up there are limiting everyone to getting a first dose first, and they're delaying when you get your second dose. So the priority in Canada is make sure everyone gets at least 1 shot in, versus here in the States, we prioritized having people make sure they get their second shot as soon as possible. Okay. So I'm not sure when you're even going to be eligible for getting your second dose up in Canada. It's just a different priority that they gave it up there. All right. All right. Good luck to you, Nina. And nice to see you here again. I'm sorry to see you here again, but good luck to you. Hello, Anna. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. How is Thor doing today? Everyone, you probably know I bring my Basenjis in, and sometimes Thor is sitting back on the chair there, but you can tell he's not here today. So Thor's got a little bit of an upset stomach today, I think. So he's hanging out underneath my desk right now, laying next to his sister, Halo. They're both under there just sleeping away and snoring a little bit. I can hear the snoring from here. You're not able to hear it, though. But anyhow, thanks for asking about him. Let's see. Can Lyme and co-infections cause uterine and ovarian cysts and fibroids and adenomyosis? Can they live and grow inside the cyst and fibroids, contributing to their growth in painful periods? Can antibiotic treatment alleviate the symptoms completely without the need for surgical intervention? Thank you kindly. So I have not seen a relationship in my practice or in what other people are reporting or in the scientific literature between ovarian cysts, fibroids, adenomyosis, and Lyme and co-infections. I'm not aware of a linkage between them, okay? What I will tell you is that when I do have somebody that has either ovarian cyst or even breast cyst for that matter, I am aware that sometimes estrogen medicines that have estrogen effect may make those worse. So on an herbal side, I might be a little bit more inclined not to use cat's claw. Cat's claw does have some estrogenic effect, okay? And estrogen can cause cysts to grow, basically, all right? Prescription antibiotics, I'm not aware of any of them having an estrogenic effect, all right? So I think they're generally okay. And the only herb I am aware of, based on what I see in my practice, that seems to have some estrogenic effect would be the cat's claw, all right? All right. Thank you for that question, Anna. Let's see, did I answer that? Oh, can antibiotic treatment alleviate the symptoms completely? Probably not. I think they're not related to Lyme. I think you need to handle those the way that we would in anyone, whether they have Lyme or don't have Lyme. All right. Okay. Good luck to you. Hi, James. Let's see. I have chronic Lyme and my IgM level is 0.2 and the bottom reference range is 0.5. Why might this be and what might this mean? Okay, so James, IgM levels, there can be a lot of IgMs. I would need to know IgM against what to interpret this. I can't tell from your question. I also would want to know, are you actually talking more about, has somebody done quantitative measurement of general antibody levels, or are you talking about IgM made against Lyme? I can't answer your question with the information that I have. Sorry about that. Hello, Lynn. Let's see, Dr. Ross. Last week, I asked you about tapering off of an herbal protocol for Lyme and Bartonella. You suggested that because I've been symptom-free for a long time, I could just stop cold turkey. but I'm concerned that I haven't had anything in my protocol that treats persisters, and am a little worried that they may be present and come out of hibernation when the other herbs are withdrawn. Can you recommend an herbal protocol I could add at the end to address persisters before I withdraw treatment? And for how long would you do it? All right, it's a good question. I mean, it's a good point. Everyone, the world of Lyme and changed about 4 years ago, and the world of Bartonella changed about 1 year ago. I'll just start by saying that. And that is, in both the world of Lyme and Bartonella, we now know that germs can exist in two different kind of growth states. There are growing germs, and there are what are called persister forms of the germs, okay? So growing germs, the antibiotics that we have tended to use, whether herbal or prescription antibiotics, tend to do a better job of treating growing forms of the germs than they do persisters. And so now that we know that Bartonella can have these persister forms or growth state, and Lyme can have it, we've been trying to do investigations, trying to figure out what do we use. So many of you may be familiar with the drug disulfiram that kind of took the Lyme world by storm a couple of years ago. That is an agent that was discovered that can treat persister forms of Lyme, but it does not appear, based on research that was published out of Johns Hopkins about a year ago, actually over a year ago now, to do anything about persister Bartonella. Johns Hopkins University is running a lab right now, or out of a Johns Hopkins University lab that's run by Dr. Ying Zhang. Dr. Zhang has been doing investigations trying to figure out what do we use for persisters. And these are all laboratory experiments. And he's discovered a number of agents that can treat persisters. So for both Lyme and for Bartonella, essential oils of cinnamon, clove, and oregano all have activity against growing and persister forms of the germ. And in some of the experiments, oregano has been shown to actually remove biofilm from the germs as well, too. Okay. In addition, more recent studies that have come out of Dr. Ying Zhang's lab show that for the Lyme germ, that cat's claw, Japanese knotweed, I believe skullcap is one, and cryptolepis. Cryptolepis is an herb we traditionally use to treat babesia, but it appears, based on Ying Zhang studies, that cryptolepis can actually treat growing Lyme and treat persister Lyme. His studies also show that the cat's claw treats growing Lyme and treats persister Lyme. Now, he did not take crypto in that study, and he did not take cat's claw in that study or the knotweed and try to see, do they treat persister forms of Bartonella? So I don't know, okay? Now, my comments to you last time is that what I tend to see is that when somebody is completely well for 2 months, you can stop, and the majority of people do not relapse, okay? So although we have this huge focus right now on persisters, we don't have any science yet in living humans to show, do persisters ultimately result in people relapsing? We don't know, all right? Because I will tell you, there's lots of people that I get well by never giving them anything for persisters in the past, and they would go on and never relapse. So it's possible that even though we don't give you things for persisters, maybe the immune system has a way of dealing with those agents, okay? All right. So my comments were to you last time was that, yeah, you've been well for 2 months. And in general, in my practice, I don't see people relapse when you've been well for 2 months and you can stop. Okay. All right. But if you want to take an extra added step, what you might consider doing is adding a product to your regimen, which is made by Doctor Inspired Formulations. You can find it at my supplement store. I'll show you where it is here in a minute. But the product is called liposomal cinnamon, clove, and oregano essentials. Okay, Doctor Inspired Formulations. You do that 1 pill twice a day. That's going to handle persisters on the Lyme side, and it's going to handle persisters on the Bartonella side. And the oregano that's in there seems to have ability to break up biofilm slime layers that block out the treatment as well too. Okay. If you want to get a little stronger on the Lyme side, you could add cryptolepis, 5 milliliters 3 times a day to that regimen. You could be on cat's claw, up to 30 drops twice a day on that regimen as well too. Okay, those are some things to think about, and those are some things I actually have been adding into some of my treatments as well too. Okay, all right. So let me just do a quick screen share here for you. Okay. So this is my supplement store. This is Marty Ross MD supplements. Anyone can purchase from my supplement store, okay? I have this so that my patients have a place they can go to order their supplements. But again, this is for anyone. So if you're looking for, in terms of the products I was just mentioning, you can look under my mega menu here. The Doctor Inspired Formulations tab is right there. And this is the product I was talking about, the cinnamon, clove, and oregano essentials. Okay, all right. So that's one place to look at. In terms of sources for cryptolepis, you could take a look at Wildcraft Herbs, and their cryptolepis is here. It's probably one of your lower cost sources of cryptolepis out there. Okay, so that's 5 milliliters 3 times a day that I have do that. And this is the cat's claw product that I recommend as well too. All right. All right. Lynn, thanks for the question. Good luck to you. Oh, I would probably do it for about a couple months if you're going to add that in. All right. Good luck. Hello, Anna. Hello, Dr. Ross. Case study, Lyme and sexual hormones, replacement therapy. Can progesterone supplementation for premenopausal woman 50 induce cessation of periods and hair loss? The numbers before progesterone started, estradiol 645. Hold on here a minute. There we go. Let's see. Numbers before progesterone started, estradiol 645, progesterone 0.6, DHEA 4.4. Numbers after 4 months on progesterone, estradiol 748, progesterone 22.3, DHEA 7.2. Numbers after 2 months on progesterone, 100 to 200 milligrams, day 15 to menses, estradiol 44, progesterone 11, DHEA 7. Would you recommend adding estradiol to progesterone for a treatment, and what dosage? So, Anna, I'm not going to be able to make a solid recommendation on this. I need to know more about what you're trying to do with the hormones specifically. So, for instance, we can use progesterone to manage symptoms related to perimenopause, and that would be to help with hot flashes, for instance, or to deal with mood swings, for instance. Okay. I tend myself not to be in a school of thought that says that if you're not having symptoms like those symptoms from changes in your hormones, that I don't tend to give hormones just to chase a number around. Okay. Those are the symptoms I'm going to tend to use hormones for. Now, I know some of my colleagues will use estrogen and progesterone in the perimenopausal period, even after menopause, to actually try to get you into what they think is an optimal level to help you with energy and maybe even thinking, etc. What I would say is the science is really still out on that. Where I tend to go with this is that menopause is a natural phenomenon. Women are programmed, your hormonal systems are programmed in a way that says that at a certain age, your body is supposed to function with lower levels of hormones. And that if we go in and start adjusting that, maybe we can help you feel good in one place, but maybe we're going to cause problems in another place, right? So for instance, estrogen can sometimes lead to breast cancer, for instance. So I tend not to do a lot of hormone manipulation unless I've got a very limited specific reason, which is hot flashes interrupting sleep and maybe bad mood swings. In those situations, I might do it. But for other purposes, I tend not to do it. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question. Hello, Miriam. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you for this opportunity. I grew up on the East Coast, many tick bites. No big issues until I got shingles 5 years ago at 65. The shingles went away, but I got sicker and sicker. No idea what was wrong. I felt like I had been poisoned. A year ago, after much reading, I realized I probably had some part of the Lyme complex. A Mayo Clinic antibody test, limited in scope, came back with anaplasma 1 to 64. Oh, with anaplasma only. Okay, got it. I started an herbal protocol, 4 formulas in weekly rotation, taking many good quality supplements, plus glutathione, curcumin, ashwagandha. 2 months ago, added ATP 360, drinking a lot of water, simple, clean diet, also dry skin brushing, far-infrared sauna. I have seen gradual improvement. Main symptoms have been extreme fatigue and weakness, heaviness in the limbs, lots of joint pains and inflammation, equilibrium impaired, staggering gait, brain fog, but not too bad, shortness of breath, cold, especially in extremities, then suddenly too hot. Here we gotta see if I can find a second part to this. Oh, here we are. I couldn't, let's see, tremors in arms with motion, tingling and numbness in toes, a sense of hollowness in the chest as if the life force is draining, floaters, dry eyes, nasty vibration in chest and limbs with anxiety, feeling very toxic, loss of appetite, huge loss of muscle mass, no big psych symptoms. Question: does this sound like anaplasma only? And any suggestions as to what else I can do? The weakness and fatigue are still a big problem, especially since January. The JJ vaccine last week. I can barely dress and feed myself some days, arms, hands, uncoordinated still. Any light you can shed on the matter would be much appreciated. So, Miriam, no, this sounds beyond anaplasma. Anaplasma is going to tend to give maybe some fatigue, but a lot of myalgia, muscle achiness. The types of symptoms you're describing fall more into the camp of the symptoms we might see with chronic Lyme. They also fall into the camp of things we might see with Bartonellosis. What I would strongly suggest, and then you also have risk factors for Lyme given all the tick bites that you had, okay? So I would strongly suggest trying to get a better quality test. The Mayo is not a good test. I'm chuckling because it's just not, even though they think it's a good test and the majority of infectious disease doctors think it's a good test. What the Mayo test is doing when it comes to looking for the Lyme germ is they're doing an antibody test to see if you have antibodies against the original strain of Lyme that was discovered out in Connecticut in the 70s, okay? In the 70s. All right, but we now know there are many strains of Lyme that can infect you. So that test is only useful in finding one strain. IGeneX, on the other hand, the lab out in California called IGeneX that can send you a test kit, performs a test called an immunoblot for Lyme. And that test, based on their validation studies where they actually tested their test to see how accurate it is at finding cases when they're there and not over finding cases when they're not there, okay? That lab has been able to show their immunoblot is looking to see if you have antibodies against 8 kinds of Lyme germ, okay? And these days, more and more on the East Coast, what we're seeing is that a lot of some of the strains that were in Europe, like Borrelia guarini and Borrelia afzelii, have come across the pond. And so up and down the East Coast, we're starting to see a lot more afzelii. We're starting to see a lot more guarini. That extends up into Nova Scotia as well, and up into Quebec and up into Ontario. So we're seeing a lot of European strains out there. And the traditional way that Mayo and LabCorp and other labs will look for Lyme, they're going to miss those strains, all right? So the Lyme test through IGeneX called the immunoblot, not their Western blot, but their immunoblot is what you want to do. It will find Lyme if present, according to their validation studies, 95% of the time. And when it finds it, due to the way they do the test, the chances of a false positive is about next to zero. Okay, it's a good test, okay? And then in terms of looking to see if you might have Bartonella, more and more I'm using, IGeneX has come up with a newer way of doing that as of about a year ago. The problem with Bartonella testing is we recognize, and those of us that manage tick-borne illnesses recognize that there are 15 kinds of Bartonella that can infect you. The lab that would have been done at Mayo or by LabCorp or Quest, any of those labs, is only looking to see if you have antibodies against one or two strains. The two strains to look for will be Bartonella henselae and Bartonella cantana. They usually are not testing for more than that, nor are they capable of doing it. But we recognize there probably are 15 kinds that infect humans, okay? So IGeneX developed a test over a year ago that looks to see if you have antibodies against the whole family that includes these 15. And in addition, they can determine specifically 4 different kinds that you have. So if you were to do their test and it comes back positive for one of the, for the family, but it's negative on one of the 4, it means you have one of the other 11 strains, okay? All right. That test is called the Bartonella WB, which stands for Western blot. And you would want to do it for both IgM and IgG antibodies. The immunoblot for Lyme I was telling you about, you would want to do it for the IgM and IgG antibodies as well too. Okay, so I would explore more. I don't think you have your answers here based on what you've written here. Okay, and again, I'm hamstrung by not being able to ask you a lot of questions, but just based on your symptoms, what you've told me, there's a lot going on there that suggests Bartonella to me, and there's a lot going on there that suggests Lyme to me as well too. Okay, all right. Good luck to you. Hi, James. Let's see. My MCV level is always a bit above the reference range. My B12 and folate levels are good, and increasing B12 and folate has no effect on the MCV. What might this be, and what might this mean? So when somebody has, so MCV, everyone, is a term, initials that stand for something called mean corpuscular volume. Kind of a mouthful there. What an MCV or mean corpuscular volume is basically the size of your red blood cells, all right? And we know that the size of the red blood cells can be increased. One cause or two causes of them being increased are low B12 and low folate levels can give you increased size of your red blood cells, all right? So those are the two known reversible causes. To be honest, we don't have other good explanation. There are some people that just have increased MCV, and we don't have a way to fix it, nor does it necessarily mean it's harming a person. When the reason we check B12 and folate is when you have increased MCV, it basically is a clue that you might also have low B12 or low folate. And if you do have low B12 or folate, we do want to correct those so you don't run into problems related to them. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, James. Hello, Amy. Let's see. What do you recommend for leg cramps, spasms? They disrupt my sleep, and I'm concerned that I won't heal from Lyme because I'm not getting good rest. Thank you. So when somebody has Lyme and they have leg cramps, one of the things I usually will do is to start by making sure they're getting a lot or adequate amounts of magnesium, I should say. And so I like working with either magnesium citrate or magnesium malate. Those are two different salt forms of magnesium. They can help often to stop that. And usually what I'll try to do is see if somebody can tolerate around 600 milligrams a night of the magnesium. You take it at night because it can make you drowsy, all right? The only thing that can happen with magnesium that may limit your ability to get a lot in is in some people it can lead to loose stools and diarrhea. So, and if that does happen, then you need to decrease it from 600 milligrams down to, say, 450 milligrams and try that, okay? But that's where I would start. If that doesn't work, then the other thing you might want to do is to be on a muscle relaxer that you take at night, like a Robaxin, methocarbamol, Flexeril, which is cyclobenzaprine. Any of those would be prescription ways to do muscle relaxers that you take just at night to keep your muscles from going into spasm. But I'd start with the magnesium first, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Amy. Hello, Brandy. What antivirals do you recommend, either prescription or natural? Thanks. What symptoms suggest native viral burden? All right, so let me start with the virus. The viral burden? So viruses are tricky. And I think there's a lot of over-treatment for viruses that is done, and let me explain why. So there are a number of viruses that are found in healthy people. All right, so for instance, if I were to pull 100 healthy people off the street, I would find 20% or so that would have elevated antibodies against either or one or more of the following: Epstein-Barr, which is the monovirus, human herpes virus type 6, cytomegalovirus, parvovirus B19, Coxsackie virus. So if you have Lyme, many of you have doctors that have tested you to see if you had elevated antibody levels against viruses. And if you do, they say they need to treat you for virus infections, right? Well, the problem with that is viruses are common, and they even live in healthy people. We cohabitate with them. We live, just like we live with bacteria in our skin and bacteria in our mouth, they never cause us problems. We can live with viruses in us that never cause us problems. And in fact, we know that because I can pull 100 healthy people off the street and test them, and I'll find elevated virus antibodies in at least 20% of them, okay? So finding elevated antibodies does not prove that your viruses are causing you a problem. What they can mean is that your immune system is doing what it's supposed to do, which is helping you cohabitate with these viruses. And they're basically working to keep the germ load down or keep it under control, all right? So what we really are interested in is, do you have an elevated germ load? And finding elevated antibodies doesn't tell me what's going on with your germ load. It just says your immune system is reacting against the viruses, maybe in a good way, okay? Now, when somebody has chronic Lyme and they're not doing well, it is possible that because of immune suppression caused by Lyme, that the viruses do actually get out of control. They do actually start growing too much, okay? But what I do in my practice at first is I work on getting Lyme under control and getting mold toxins under control if that's going on, and getting people sleep and lowering cytokines and supporting their adrenal glands. All those things that are in the Ross Lyme support protocol that you do right away, those are designed to help get your immune system working better. Because ultimately, getting your Lyme germ down, getting your adrenals working better, lowering cytokines, getting sleep, that's all going to turn the immune system on to actually deal with those viruses, all right? Now, if somebody is about 6 to or maybe 9 months or so into treatment and they're not getting better, then I'm going to start wanting to explore, could their viruses be active, all right? And so one of the ways that I will look for that is a kind of an experimental test, which is to measure an enzyme in their blood called nagalase. And nagalase is an enzyme that is found in the covering of viruses. And so if you have elevated nagalase, then that's a suggestion of an increased virus load, meaning your viral volume is greater than it should be, and probably your immune system isn't keeping the viruses under control, okay? Now that nagalase test is not tell you which viruses are elevated. It just says you've got all these enzymes in you that indicate you do have too many viruses, all right? So if that comes back elevated, then I often am going to wind up trying to treat for a chronic virus infection overload, if you will, all right? And so there's a few things I'd like to do in my practice to deal with that. Number one, I'd like to work with olive leaf extract as a general antiviral herbal medicine. You could also work with monolaurin too. That's another option. I just tend to find better success working with olive leaf extract. And I'll start a person at 500 milligrams 3 times a day. And about every week, I'll try to increase the dose by 500 milligrams a dose, trying to work up to a total of 3 500 milligram pills 3 times a day. Keep in mind, if you start killing viruses, that can trigger a Herxheimer reaction, which is why I tend to build the dose of it up slowly, okay? Second thing I try to do is to support the antiviral part of the immune system. And what I like using are mushrooms, and specifically I like working with reishi mushrooms that tend to seem to have a better job than other type of mushrooms at turning on the antiviral part of the immune system. And a typical dose might be 400 to 500 milligrams 3 times a day of reishi mushrooms, okay? And those are 2 of the main things that I'm going to do. The last thing I might do is to try to target the immune system to fight those viruses. And I would use a product called transfer factor plasmic. Transfer factors are proteins that are made by some of our white blood cells that will tell the immune system to go after a certain germ, okay? And the transfer factor plasmic mix is made up of a number of transfer factors that target very specific viruses and will help your immune system to go after those. And I would do, it's a product made by Research Nutritionals, and that is 1 pill 2 times a day is how I would do that one, okay? All right, so I'm gonna do a quick screen share here because I wanna show you where you can read more about this, including the test that I mentioned, the nagalase, and what kind of agents do you want to use for it too. All right, so in terms, we'll start here. In terms of the transfer factors, so Research Nutritionals is a company that makes transfer factor products. And they have a number of transfer factor, oops, didn't even spell that right. There we are. They have a number of transfer factor products. And so if you're ever wondering which transfer factor works on what, in my product descriptions, I have actually put information in so you can see which germs does this transfer factor target. So for instance, this transfer factor plasmic that I was just telling you about, if you were to read down to the product description here, I say key functions and actions, and it targets basically, these are the germs that it targets, okay? Including, some of these are viruses, some of them are actually bacteria, but this is your broader antiviral transfer factor mix right here, okay? All right. And then in terms of how do you test for and how do you handle the viruses, if you're wanting to read what I was just talking about, take a look under my infection treatment plans and take a look at this article here called When and How to Treat Chronic Viruses in Lyme, a brief guide. Okay, I talk about testing, what do you use, when is it time to start thinking about it, okay? All right, then. As I mentioned earlier, there's basic steps you should do at the beginning of your treatment protocol. And if you do these, it's going to help turn your immune system on. All right. And that's in my Ross Lyme support protocol, which is right here. Okay. And a read through here, you'll see lots of information. But basically, the key steps that you want to do, number 1, get sleep, because that restores your immune system and helps lower cytokines. Number 2, I like to suggest that people be on a paleo type diet or to help decrease inflammation. Number 3, decrease cytokine inflammation, because too many cytokines will suppress your immune system. And I give you ideas on how to do that there. Number 4, be on something that helps your body deal with stress, an adaptogen like ashwagandha. Number 5, look and see if you have hormonal insufficiency, and if so, correct it. Number 6, be on a good multivitamin. Number 7, take a basic detox step of avoiding toxins in foods, but also trying to use glutathione to support detox. Number 8, work with exercise as you can. Now, if you're getting blown apart from exercise, don't do it, but find a level you can tolerate, okay? Number 9, immune boosters. You're going to notice that I say here, don't use any, because basically These steps up here, the first 8 steps, are all designed to boost your immune system, okay? But, if you're about 6 months or more into treatment and you're not getting any better, then you may want to take some additional steps to boost your immune system. Number 10, get rid of yeast if you have too many yeast, and then treat your Lyme infection and treat your co-infections, okay? Those are the 12 key steps that anyone should be dealing with during their treatment, and all of these collectively turn your immune system on so it can get those viruses under control if they are a problem, all right? All right, Brandy, that's all. I know you asked a brief question and you got all that from me, but I hope that gives you some useful information to work with, okay? All right, good luck to you. Hello, Clay. Let's see. Is it possible to successfully treat chronic Lyme with herbal antibiotics, or are pharmaceutical antibiotics the only effective route? And do harmful do herbal antibiotics harm gut bacteria? All right. So first of all, in terms of herbal antibiotics in the gut microbiome, they tend to have a much less chance of disturbing the gut microbiome compared to prescription antibiotics. All right. I know Buhner, as in Buhner Herbs, I believe has said that he really doesn't think they disturb the gut microbiome. I disagree with that. I've had people that I've done Banderol and or Casclaw and Otobabark regimens, and even Cytokine regimens that we use for Bartonella on those last 2, and I've seen them develop yeast overgrowth, okay? But I will tell you, though, that the herbal antibiotics have a less chance of causing those problems than the prescription antibiotics, all right? Can you recover completely from Lyme on an herb-only regimen? Yeah, I've had people do that. The odds are this: when I treat somebody for chronic Lyme germ, and then I'll talk about Babesia germ, and then I'll talk about Bartonella germ. But for the Lyme germ, herbal antibiotic regimens that I use in my practice, which is mainly Otobabark and cat's claw together, I find to be effective in about 80 to 85% of people. Okay, all right, that's what I find. All right, I find that for and which is kind of comparable. Those two have as great a chance of helping anyone as prescription antibiotic regimens do. Okay, for Lyme. All right, for Bartonella, the 2 herbs I like using are the Cytokine. Those 2 I find to work effectively about 70-75% of the time. The prescription regimens you might use for Bartonella, each of those that you would use stands about an 80 to 85% chance of working. So on Bartonella, you run a 10% better chance of getting well from prescription versus herbal, okay? Babesia, I find about an 85% chance of success using any one prescription regimen. That means if one fails, you try another one, okay? And it has an 80 to 85% chance. And then I find that the herbal regimens work about 80% of the time. So there's about a 5% difference there, okay? All right. All right, now Clay, I see you have a third question here too. Let me get that pulled up. Let's see. Clay said, I sent the first 2 questions, but my third question is, there it is. It's all the way up here. My third question is this: are university tick testing labs worth the time and money? I mean, are they accurate? The one that I know of as being accurate and being as accurate as IGeneX would be is the State University of New York, the SUNY Stony Brook lab. Runs a very thorough Lyme germ test, all right? Well, they will report out whether their Western blot has made antibodies against a variety of proteins found in the covering of the germ, which is much more expansive than LabCorp and some of the other ones, okay? That is the only lab I would trust, but it's just specifically for the Lyme germ. That's it, all right? Okay. Good luck to you, Clay. Hello, Dave. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I will begin to take liposomal glutathione 2 times a day and ATP 360 3 pills a day to help with the nerve damage caused by disulfiram. What's the best way to take these supplements, empty stomach or with food? Can taking these supplements for a long period of time cause any health issues or any associated risk? Being that I'm in the wine business, can I drink red wine while taking these supplements? Thank you. So I'm not aware of any risk from taking these specific supplements. I have had an occasional person on the ATP 360 will get jittery with it. It's rare that I see that happen though, okay? The liposomal glutathione, rarely people might have an allergic reaction to it, but generally these are both extremely well tolerated, okay? So everyone, what Dave is talking about is ATP 360 is a product that has in it some fats, phospholipid fats that can repair the nerve cell membrane and can also repair the mitochondria membrane. Mitochondria, the energy factories found in every one of our cells. And sometimes when people have been treated with various antibiotics or when they have long-term infection, the mitochondria can get injured. If it gets injured, you can't repair. You don't have enough energy in your cells to repair, okay? And the glutathione is a very strong antioxidant that can get inside of cells and repair damage from the inside, also can get inside of the mitochondria and repair it from the inside. So Dave's been having a lot of trouble with nerve pain that started, or nerve dysfunction and pain, I believe, that started after taking disulfiram. And what I had suggested, I believe it was last week, that he do some nerve membrane repair, but also, or to do nerve repair, but also mitochondria repair to help those nerves start working better, okay? And this is the way you do it. You fix the phospholipid membranes with the ATP 360, and you fix the, use this strong antioxidant that gets inside of cells and inside the mitochondria and fixes damage from the inside, okay? All right, let's see. Now, can you drink alcohol on this? I have no problem with you drinking alcohol periodically on this. And then, let's see, can you take them? So to me, I find no difference whether people take these with food or without food. I think you can go either way, okay? All right, good luck to you, Dave. So everyone, that ATP 360 is a product that is made by Research Nutritionals. It is their mitochondria repair supplement. It is a newer generation of a product. They have two other products. One is called NT Factor and another one called ATP Fuel, all right? Now, both the ATP Fuel and the ATP 360, well, the ATP 360 was designed to replace the ATP Fuel, okay? The big difference between ATP Fuel, ATP 360, and NT Factor, their other one, is that the NT Factor does not include any coenzyme Q10. ATP Fuel and ATP 360 both include coenzyme Q10 as micronutrients that they have. And you do not want to use those last two, ATP Fuel and ATP 360, if you are on Malarone, atovaquone, or atovaquone with proquinol. Anything that has atovaquone in it for babesia, you do not want to be on something that has coenzyme Q10 in it because it will interfere with how it functions, okay? All right. So for those of you that are interested in looking at how you do mitochondria repair and what the key differences is between these three products, let me just do a quick screen share here for you. Okay, so in terms of mitochondria, so if you're looking at things you can do to fix mitochondria, which will also fix nerve injury, take a look at this article called How to Fix Mitochondria and Get Energy in Lyme Disease. Excuse me. All right, and then in terms of and then here's the article down here. It's called A Comparison of ATP Fuel, ATP 360, and NT Factor Energy by Research Nutritionals. It's an article where I do compare the differences in those three products, okay? Now, I will tell you, Research Nutritionals just published a study. Research Nutritionals just published a study that is showing quite a good benefit from their ATP 360. It appears that it can help with thinking, can help with energy levels, and some other things they found in that study too. So it looks like an effective product, okay? All right. All right. Hello, Julie. Let's see. Our cat tested positive for 2 strains of Bartonella in the summer of 2019. 1 round of azithromycin knocked out 1 strain, but not Bartonella henselae. A second round left him nearly blind. I brought his vision back with a ton of supplements, then found your site and used hutini and serapeptase for, I think, 3 months. I didn't use Sitacuta because I couldn't find it being used with cats, and I didn't use oregano oil because it's bad for cats. I saw somewhere that serapeptase works on biofilms, and that was being used on cats, so that is why I used that. Thank you so much for that information. You provided your website. Our cat was crying in his sleep the week where his vision was very bad. Thank you for providing the cure. But I want to talk about my husband today. I was wondering where we were going with this cat discussion. I'm glad your cat's doing better. As you know, I'm not a veterinarian, but I'm glad you were able to find something that gave you some insight to help with your cat. Let me see if I can find the second part of your question here. There we go. Okay, my husband had a stroke just before Christmas in 2020. They found a growth on his aortic valve and said he had endocarditis. He also has an elevated C-reactive protein and had a PSA of 11.3. His most recent PSA test was 12. I think he has Bartonella endocarditis because he has other symptoms of IE, namely random unexplained muscle aches. But his face sometimes turns blotchy with pink-purple spots after showers, and he got a rash after getting his first Moderna vaccine. He is also weak and not as confident in his coordination and tired. He used to have a really good memory, but now he occasionally forgets something on a grocery list. All right, Julie, I'm going to look to see if there's one more part, but if this gets too much longer, I'm going to need to... This format works better for short questions, so let me see if you give me a question in the third part here. All right, we want to order tests for Bartonella ourselves. Okay, got it. Galaxy Labs has some tests that seem good, and we can order from them. I'm not sure which ones we can order yet. What would you suggest we order? I suspect Bartonella because our cat had it, and I see symptoms that I mentioned in another paragraph. Sorry about that. I'm new. All right, Julie, so here's the issue. So Galaxy Labs, which is a lab that focuses on testing for Bartonella, offers 3 different tests that you're going to be able to get. One is an IFA antibody test, where they're going to look to see if you have antibodies against Bartonella henselae, and I think Bartonella cantana. You can get antibody testing from them. Okay. The trouble is the antibody testing may miss it quite often. All right. The second part of their test looks to see if you have is a PCR test where you look to see do you have the genetic material floating around in your blood, okay? And of 15 different strains of Bartonella. So in theory, that's better than their IFA test, which is limited, I believe, to 2 strains of antibodies or antibodies against 2 strains of germs, versus their PCR test has the ability to look and see if you have genetic material of the 15 strains that we think infect humans, okay? So you might think, well, that's got to be a better test, all right? In theory, yeah, but in reality, not. The problem with their PCR test, and they have a regular PCR test, or they call it an enhanced PCR test, where they use a special growth medium to try to get it to amplify the amount of DNA in a person from the germ, so they have a better chance of seeing it, okay? They also have a triple blood draw enhanced PCR test for Bartonella. And by drawing 3 samples, they think they're going to have a better chance of finding it. Okay, here's what the issue is. Bartonella doesn't live in the blood. Bartonella tends to not just float around in blood, it tends to live inside of cells. So if you draw blood and it's not there, it doesn't prove you don't have it. In fact, we do not know how sensitive the Galaxy test is at finding Bartonella when it's there. They have not been able to do studies that tell us what is the chance their test will actually pick up Bartonella when it's there. We don't know, okay? And there's a great chance it could miss it even on the triple blood draw because Bartonella just doesn't readily live in the blood, okay? Right. Because of that, the testing I'm tending to do these days is actually through IGeneX. And IGeneX is doing an antibody test, and which is measuring somewhere in your body has your immune system detected Bartonella and made antibodies that are now floating around in your blood. And we got a lot more antibodies floating in our blood for Bartonella than we do Bartonella DNA or Bartonella germs themselves, okay? So IGeneX, that test through IGeneX is called the Bartonella WB test or Western blot test. And you would want to do it for IgM and IgG antibodies. They have the ability to detect if you have antibodies against all 15 strains. And their validity is that they have done validation studies that show that it has the ability to find Bartonella if it's there. That is 90% of the time. Pretty good test, okay? That tends to be what I'm using these days, okay? All right. Good luck to you, and good luck to your husband, too. All right. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello, Dr. Ross. Would you comment on bee therapy for Lyme, if you know about it, and if so, does it treat co-infections such as Bartonella and babesiosis? Thanks. So bee venom therapy involves injecting bee venom into you, okay? And the way that people will do it is they actually will have bees and they place them on them and they purposefully have those bees sting them, all right? There are some people that will do bee venom injections, but usually most of this is done just by having a bee sting you, all right? So bee venom has some chemicals in it that are mainly anti-inflammatory. They help lower cytokines. So one of the benefits of bee venom may be that it is anti-cytokine. It lowers those inflammation chemicals. The other thing, there are some chemicals in bee venom that are antimicrobial, all right? And are antimicrobial against Lyme. One of those studies that's been done that showed that is out of Eva Choppe's lab in New Haven, Connecticut. She's a Lyme disease researcher who did research maybe about 4 or 5 years ago now. She published a study looking at some of the chemicals in bee venom as to whether they could kill Lyme. I have not seen anyone do studies that look at whether it can kill Bartonella or Babesia, and frankly, I don't know if people get benefit on that, all right? Now, I have seen some people in my practice that we got them quite well by doing prescription antibiotics and herbal antibiotics, but we couldn't get them all the way there. That wound up adding in bee venom therapy and got a lot better, okay? Some. The majority of people I find do not get ongoing benefit from bee venom therapy. The majority do not, okay? But as in anything in Lyme, there are some people that will benefit, all right? So I wouldn't hang my hat on this being the treatment that's going to get you all the way there, but it could, okay? All right. And good luck to you. Hi, Kathy. Let's see. Is positive parietal antibodies an absolute diagnosis for pernicious anemia if B12 and RBC count is normal? Very interesting. So everyone, pernicious anemia means that you have low blood counts, anemia, low blood counts, being caused by not having enough B12 in your blood. And the cause of that is that your stomach or your body makes antibodies against a protein called intrinsic factor within that is intrinsic factor is supposed to be made by the stomach to bind up B12 to help it be absorbed. And if your immune system is attacking your intrinsic factor, then you're not going to have adequate B12 absorption. So what's interesting here is that you've got adequate B12 and you're not seeing any effects of low B12, meaning you don't have your blood count is normal. Then that would suggest that even though you may be making antibodies against your B12, it's still getting absorbed. Or it could suggest it's a false positive antibody test. All right. So it's possible it's a false positive test. Unless somehow you're supplementing B12 by taking it under your tongue. If you put B12 under your tongue, it bypasses the stomach and gets absorbed right into the bloodstream. Okay, that would be one explanation. The other thing is you don't want to just look at your blood count. You want to look at the size of the blood vessels. So if your MCV that I talked about earlier is large, that might still be a suggestion that B12 is abnormal. But something isn't making sense here, basically. If you have normal B12, your red blood count is normal, and if your MCV is normal, I would suspect there might be a lab error or a false positive intrinsic factor antibody test, okay? Keep in mind, any test we do for anything can have false positives. Any test, okay? So they're not always perfect. So you have to say, does this make sense? Okay. Good luck to you, Kathy. Hello, Heather. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you for doing these. After being sick for 4 years, I'm finally getting testing through Vibrant Wellness for Lyme and co-infections. I've been treating Bartonella with herbs and just restarted doxycycline last week for my jaw pain, which it has been helping. Do I need to stop these treatments before testing? Also, I found out a couple months ago that I have an aneurysm on my left ophthalmic artery. Could this be caused by Bartonella, since Bartonella affects blood vessels? So it could be, but the chances are it may be something else that caused that aneurysm, okay? In terms of Vibrant Wellness and the technique that they use to test for these infections, you would be okay remaining on antimicrobials before you have it drawn, all right? Now, as to whether Vibrant is the most accurate lab in the world, I don't know. The problem with Vibrant Wellness is they're a new lab, and they have come up with ways of testing for Lyme and co-infections. They've only done validation studies on their Lyme test. They have not done validation studies on their Bartonella, Babesia, and co-infection test. So it's unclear to me when you get a result from a Vibrant on those other germs, whether they're accurate or not, because they haven't done testing to prove that their technique is accurate. All right. I tend not to use them because of that, but see what they show, and then discuss it with your provider and see where you go next. Okay. All right. Thanks for the question, Heather. Hello, Margaret. Hi, Dr. Ross. I recently noticed I'm dreaming, which I rarely have dreams. They are not good ones either. Let's see. There's a second part here. Let's see. Would you speak about these, please? Thank you for the knowledge you offer for all affected with Lyme disease. Margaret, so I tend to see, sometimes I will see nightmares and difficult dreams when people have Bartonella. Sometimes I'll see it, but it's not exclusive to Bartonella. Beyond that, I don't have a good explanation, and I don't have a good approach. I mean, I usually find when people start having nightmares that they just keep treating the underlying infections that are there, and usually they're going to go away, okay? But I don't have a better explanation than that. All right, good luck to you. Hello, June. Let's see, what is the best treatment for Bartonella? So if we look at, I'll give you an answer, okay? So if we look at the end of 2019, Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Ying Zhang's lab published a study looking at what are the best antibiotics to treat growing forms of Bartonella. And also over the time, he's been looking at what do you use to treat persister forms of Bartonella. So remember earlier tonight, I talked about you can have two growth states of the germ. You have these growing forms, and then you have these hibernating persister forms, and they each require something different, okay? So Ying Zhang's lab showed that a family of antibiotics called macrolides that include azithromycin and clarithromycin work well, and he only studied one of those, but it was azithromycin, and if azithromycin works well, clarithromycin probably does too, okay? The other antibiotic that was the strongest was rifampin in his study, which is a representative of two antibiotics called rifabutin and rifampin, all right? So generally, when I first started treatment, I'm going to either use azithromycin and rifampin, or I'm going to use clarithromycin and rifabutin. That's for the growing form of the germ, okay? Now, I know more recently, one of my colleagues, Dr. Mozignani, who also treats a lot of Bartonella, is a Bartonella expert, is thinking that in his practice, he sees better effective using clarithromycin with rifabutin as being the lead agents. And so, but at this point, I would either start with clarithromycin and rifabutin, or I would start with azithromycin and rifampin. And that's for the growing forms, okay? For persister forms, I like to have people on a combination of liposomal oregano, either liposomal oregano or liposomal cinnamon clove oregano oil, all right? And that's one pill twice a day. Those oils break apart biofilms, and they also do a good job of treating persister forms as well too, all right? So that's what I tend to do with people these days when I started treatment, all right? Okay, good luck to you, June. Oops, looks like we did that one already. Hello, Lynn. Let's see. Any new info on vaccine reactions in people with existing chronic inflammatory state with Lyme and tick-borne diseases? Any preference for this population with mRNA versus J&J traditional version? All right. So the only thing I can reflect to you is that LymeDisease.org out of California has been looking to see with their people in their database what the reactions are that people with Lyme, not SIRS, but Lyme, have had with, or tick-borne diseases have had with the vaccine compared to the type of reactions that are known to happen in the general public. And what they're showing is that and I mentioned this earlier tonight, that people with Lyme don't have any worse of a problem handling the vaccine than anyone else does, that the type of side effects that people get are similar in the population with Lyme as it is with other people. I will also tell you that reflects what I see in my practice. I do not think that people with Lyme are at any increased risk of an adverse outcome from the COVID vaccine compared to anyone else who gets the COVID vaccine. That's what I see in my practice as well too, okay? In terms of a preference, for the J&J versus the Pfizer or the Moderna, my preference is to do the mRNA vaccines, and that is because research suggests a greater efficacy for those vaccines. I will say, though, that they were all shown to be 95% effective versus Johnson & Johnson was about 75% effective. There's one caveat on that, though. The Johnson & Johnson was studied at a time when there were more variants in the population versus the Pfizer and Moderna. But still, because of the slight increased chance, at least on paper, of them working better, I tend to go with the Pfizer and Moderna when I'm recommending it to my patients, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Lynn. Thank you for that question. Hello, Jackie. Wouldn't herbs be better for Lyme since they don't force Lyme into cyst form? So basically, everyone, I know I've talked about persisters tonight. Let me introduce a different concept. So the Lyme germ exists in two forms and then has different growth states of those two forms. So the two forms are spirochete, that's the corkscrew looking thing, okay? And then the spirochete can transform into a different form, which is called a cyst. And at any one time in you have spirochetes and you have cyst, okay? Now, spirochetes with some antibiotics will get stressed and become a microscopic cyst form. And when they're not stressed as much, will then turn back into the spirochete. Okay, now spirochetes and cyst have different growth states. They have growing forms and they have persister forms. Okay, so I want to be clear: a persister is not a cyst. A cyst is a form. A persister is a growth state. Okay, all right. Now, in theory, yeah, a lot of the herbs are not going to cover both cyst and spirochete forms. But in general, when it comes to the Lyme germ, I think herbs can work as well as prescription antibiotics. But when you start looking over, that's at the beginning, whenever you try something. So with the world of prescription antibiotics, you got more choices. So if the first set that you put somebody on is not working, you're going to try another set, all right? Versus if an herbal antibiotic doesn't work, well, there aren't many choices of where we go with herbal antibiotics, okay? All right. Thanks for the question. All right. Well, that's it for me tonight, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I hope you got some insights. Tomorrow morning, I am going to try to have everything out and ready for you by 9 to 9:30 in the morning. So keep an outlook in your email announcing that the recording of tonight's webinar is ready. Tomorrow, when you get that, I'd appreciate if you share it with as many people as you can to get the information out that we're creating here. Also, in tomorrow's email, there'll be a link that you can sign up for the next webinar, which is next week. Okay. All right. So I wish everyone well this week. I know we got some sunshine here in the Seattle area, and I know it's that way in other parts of the country. And I know that the COVID disease rates are falling, so we're all feeling a little bit better about getting out there. I know I plan on going out for a nice long motorcycle ride this weekend. And so I hope you all get a chance to partake in some of the lightening up of the COVID and getting into nicer weather here as well, too. All right. Good night, everyone. See you next week.